I'm going to tell you something that will change how you think about these creatures. Something that made me question everything I thought I knew about what lives in our forests. But before I start, I need you to understand that what I found wasn't just a body. What was inside that rotting carcass wasn't just biology or decomposition. It was evidence of something so disturbing, so profoundly wrong, that I've spent 2 years trying to decide if I should tell anyone at all. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel. I know you're here for the shocking parts, for the reveal, but I need you to engage with this content first. I need this story documented, recorded, spread far enough that it can't be buried. Because people have tried to bury it. People with authority and resources have tried to make me forget what I saw. So click those buttons. Make sure this reaches as many eyes as possible before someone decides it shouldn't exist. My name is Jacob Reeves. I'm 54 years old, retired Army, 22 years of service including 3 deployments. I've seen things in combat that would break most civilians. I've dealt with death, trauma, violence in forms most people can't imagine. I'm telling you this so you understand that I'm not easy to shock. I'm not someone who panics or imagines things or misidentifies what I'm looking at. What I found in those woods in November of 2021 shocked me, horrified me, changed me. I live in Clallam County, Washington, near the Olympic National Forest. After I retired in 2019, I bought a small cabin on 15 acres of heavily wooded land, backed up against thousands of acres of wilderness. I wanted isolation, quiet, space to process everything I'd been through. The cabin was perfect, no neighbors within 2 miles, a creek running through the property, old-growth forest that felt like stepping back in time. I spent most of my days hiking. Long walks through the forest with my dog, a German shepherd named Gunnar. We'd go out for hours, exploring trails and game paths, sometimes covering 10 or 12 miles in a day. I was looking for peace, looking for something to replace the adrenaline and purpose I'd lost when I left the service. The forest gave me that, mostly. November 14th, 2021. Temperature was dropping, first real cold snap of the season. I decided to explore a section of forest I hadn't visited before, about 3 miles northeast of my cabin. Dense timber, steep ravines, the kind of terrain that discourages casual hikers. Gunnar and I set out around 8 in the morning, planning to make a loop and be back by early afternoon. The smell hit us around 10:30. I've smelled death before. Enough times that I recognize it instantly, that sweet, rotten, chemical stench that announces decomposition from hundreds of yards away. Gunnar caught it first, stopped on the trail with his hackles up, whining. I smelled it a second later. Strong. Recent enough to still be aggressive, but not fresh. Days old, maybe a week. My first thought was a dead deer, or elk. Maybe a bear that had died in its den. Large animal, judging by the intensity of the smell. I should have turned back. Should have let nature handle its own processes. But military training is hard to break. You investigate unknowns. You don't ignore them. Come on, boy, I said to Gunnar. Let's check it out. We left the trail, following the smell downslope into a ravine thick with ferns and devil's club. The stench got worse with every step, that cloying sweetness that sticks in your throat and makes breathing feel like swallowing rot. Gunnar was reluctant, staying close to my leg, but he followed. We found it in a small clearing at the bottom of the ravine, next to a fallen cedar that must have been down for years. At first, I thought it was a bear. The size suggested that 7, 8 feet long, massive bulk, dark fur. But as I got closer, as my brain started processing the details, I realized the proportions were wrong. It was lying on its side, partially covered in fallen leaves and debris. The fur was dark brown, almost black in places, matted with mud and body fluids. One arm was extended, the hand, not a paw, a hand, partially buried in the dirt. The legs were too long for a bear, bent at angles that suggested knees, not the different joint structure of ursine limbs. And the face. Jesus Christ, the face. Even in death, even with decomposition bloating the features and maggots working through the exposed tissue, the face was too human. Flatter than a bear, with a pronounced brow ridge, a broad nose, lips that were pulled back from yellowed teeth in a death grimace that looked almost like a scream. I'd found a Bigfoot. A real, physical, undeniably present Bigfoot. Dead and rotting at the bottom of a ravine in the Olympic forest. I stood there for a long time, just staring. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, exactly, but from the sudden realization that everything I'd dismissed as folklore was real. That these creatures existed, had always existed, and here was one lying dead at my feet. Gunnar wouldn't approach. He stayed 10 feet back, whining, occasionally barking. Smart dog. He knew something was wrong beyond just the death. I pulled out my phone. No signal, of course, we were too deep in the ravine. But I took photos. Dozens of them. Wide shots showing the whole body. Close-ups of the face, the hands, the feet. Documentation. Proof. Evidence that would change everything. Then I made a decision that probably saved my life, even though I didn't know it at the time. I decided to examine the body more closely before hiking back to call the authorities. I approached slowly, breathing through my mouth to minimize the smell. The body was in advanced decomposition, skin sloughing off in places, cavities forming where the softer tissues had collapsed or been eaten by scavengers. But it was intact enough to see the major structures. To see that this wasn't a bear in a suit or a hoax or a misidentification. This was a real creature. Something that had lived and breathed and moved through these forests, and was now dead. I crouched next to the torso, studying the rib cage. Several ribs were broken. I could see that even through the matted fur. Broken inward, like it had been struck by something with tremendous force. The left arm was twisted at an unnatural angle, clearly broken in multiple places. This creature had died violently. Had been beaten, broken, killed with intention. That's when I noticed the chest cavity wasn't right. The bloating from decomposition should have made the torso rounded, swollen. But instead, there was a depression. A collapse in the center of the chest that suggested something was missing inside. I looked around for a stick, found a branch that was relatively straight and solid. Used it to probe the chest area, pushing aside the matted fur, trying to see what had caused the collapse. The stick went in too easily. Punctured through skin and tissue that should have had more resistance. I pulled it back, saw dark fluid coating the wood, smelled something even worse than the general rot. Something chemical and wrong. I need to stop here. I need you to comment below. Tell me what you think I should have done. Tell me if you would have kept investigating, or if you would have run. Because what I'm about to describe, what I found when I cut open that chest cavity, is something I see every time I close my eyes. Something that made me understand why people might want this buried. So comment. Engage. Let me know you're listening. I went back to my pack, pulled out the hunting knife I always carried. The blade was sharp, well-maintained. I'd field-dressed dozens of animals over the years. This should have been the same. But my hands were shaking as I positioned the blade against the creature's chest. The skin was tough, like leather, but the decomposition made it easier to cut. I made a long incision from the sternum down to the lower abdomen, the way you would field dress a deer. The smell that released was indescribable, worse than anything I'd encountered in combat, worse than any death I'd witnessed. Gunnar yelped and ran 20 yards away, refused to come back. I peeled back the skin and fur, exposed the chest cavity. And that's when I saw it. The organs were gone. Not eaten by scavengers. There were no bite marks, no evidence of animals feeding. They were removed. Surgically. I could see the clean cuts where something had sliced through connective tissue, had carefully extracted the heart, lungs, liver. Everything vital was missing. But that wasn't the disturbing part. Inside the empty chest cavity, wrapped in what looked like a plastic bag, was a tracking device. I stared at it for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds. My brain trying to process what this meant. Trying to understand why there would be a man-made device inside a creature that shouldn't exist. The tracker was maybe 4 inches long, 2 inches wide, black plastic with a small LED that blinked red every few seconds. Professional grade. Military grade. I recognized the design. I'd worked with similar devices during my deployments, tracking equipment, and occasionally personnel. Someone had tagged this creature. Someone had been monitoring its movements. And judging by the clean removal of the organs, someone had come back after it died to harvest tissue samples. But they'd left the tracker. Why leave the tracker? I reached in, my hand pushing through rotting tissue and fluid, and grabbed the device. It came free with a wet sucking sound that made my stomach turn. I pulled it out, wiped it on the ground, examined it closely. There was a serial number etched into the plastic, a government contract number, and a logo I recognized, a private military contractor I'd worked with during my second deployment. Kestrel Solutions. They did specialized work for the Department of Defense and various intelligence agencies. Black budget stuff that didn't get talked about. My mouth went dry. My hands started shaking worse. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a dead Bigfoot. This was evidence of a government operation. Evidence that someone official knew these creatures existed, was tracking them, studying them, and wanted it kept secret. I looked at the chest cavity again, at those clean surgical cuts. Someone had come out here with equipment and expertise. Had opened this creature up, removed specific organs for study, and left the body to rot. They'd taken what they needed for their research and abandoned the rest. Except they'd forgotten the tracker. Or maybe they'd assumed no one would ever find the body out here, that decomposition and scavengers would destroy any evidence before a human stumbled across it. I took more photos. The tracking device. The serial number. The surgical cuts inside the chest cavity. The broken bones that suggested this creature had been beaten to death, not died of natural causes. I documented everything, my military training taking over, evidence collection protocols running on autopilot while my conscious mind tried to process the implications. Then I heard the helicopter. Faint at first, distant, but getting closer. The distinctive thump of rotor blades cutting through air. I looked up, couldn't see anything through the dense canopy, but the sound was definitely approaching. Definitely heading in this direction. I made a decision in about 2 seconds. Shoved the tracking device in my pocket. Called Gunner. Started running upslope, back toward the trail, away from the clearing and the dead creature and whatever was coming. The helicopter got louder. I could hear it circling, searching. They were looking for the tracker signal. Looking for their equipment. And probably wondering why it was moving. I ran harder, Gunner keeping pace beside me. My lungs were burning, legs aching, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I'd done plenty of evasion training in the Army. I knew how to move through forest without leaving obvious trails. I knew how to put distance between myself and pursuit. It took 40 minutes to reach my cabin. I burst through the door, locked it behind me, grabbed my laptop. Uploaded all the photos to 3 different cloud storage accounts with different providers. Sent copies to email addresses I created on the spot. Made sure the evidence was distributed, backed up, impossible to completely erase. Then I took the tracking device to my workshop, smashed it with a hammer, buried the pieces in 3 different locations on my property. The helicopter circled my area for another hour, then left. I sat in my cabin with my rifle across my lap, watching the windows, waiting to see if anyone would come. No one did. Not that day. But 3 days later, 2 men showed up at my door. They were dressed like hikers, expensive outdoor gear, the kind of clothes that look used but aren't. But they moved wrong. Too alert, too controlled. Military or intelligence, definitely. They smiled when I opened the door, but the smiles didn't reach their eyes. Mr. Reeves? Jacob Reeves.
Yeah.
Who are you? We're with the Forest Service. We've had reports of someone disturbing wildlife in this area. Dead animals being tampered with. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? They weren't Forest Service. I knew that instantly. Forest Service doesn't send people in pairs, doesn't use the interrogation techniques these 2 were employing, standing too close, watching my reactions, controlling the conversation. Haven't seen anything, I said. You do a lot of hiking out here, though. Right? You and your dog. It's my property. I can hike where I want. The taller one, the one doing most of the talking, smiled again. Of course. We're just following up on reports. Making sure everything's secure. You haven't found anything unusual out in the woods, have you? Anything that might concern the proper authorities? Like what? Oh, dead animals. Equipment that doesn't belong. Things that seem out of place. We stared at each other for a long moment. I kept my expression neutral, my posture relaxed. Years of poker games in forward operating bases taught me how to hide reactions. Haven't seen anything, I repeated. The shorter one spoke for the first time. That's good. Because if someone did find something unusual, something that was part of an ongoing federal investigation, and they removed evidence from the scene, that would be a serious crime. Obstruction. Theft of government property. That person could face significant legal consequences. Good thing I haven't found anything then. Another long silence. The tall one reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card, handed it to me. If you do see anything unusual, give us a call. Immediately. It's important for wildlife management. I took the card. It had a phone number, nothing else. No name, no agency, no logo. They left. I watched them drive away in an unmarked SUV with government plates. Waited an hour, then checked all my cloud storage accounts. The photos were still there. I downloaded them again, saved them to encrypted thumb drives, hid those in different locations. Then I started researching. Kestrel solutions, government contracts, black budget programs. And I found things. References buried in budget documents. Whistleblower reports that had been dismissed as conspiracy theories. A few researchers who'd suggested the government knew more about cryptids than it admitted. There's a program. I'm not going to tell you the name because I don't know it. That information is classified so deep that even confirmation of its existence is denied. But it's real. It tracks, studies, and occasionally captures creatures that officially don't exist. Bigfoot.
Dogman.
Things people report seeing, but science refuses to acknowledge. They know. The government knows. And they've known for decades. They tag the creatures with tracking devices. They monitor populations. They collect bodies when they die or when they're killed and harvest tissue for study. They maintain absolute secrecy, using national security justifications to bury any evidence that leaks out. The creature I found was part of that program. Had been tagged, monitored, studied. And when it died or was killed, I still don't know which, a team went in to retrieve valuable biological samples. They took the organs. They took tissue. They left the carcass because bodies decompose, because scavengers scatter remains, because they didn't think anyone would find it in time to recognize what it was. But I did. And I have proof. I've been contacted 4 more times since that first visit. Always different people. Always with subtle threats disguised as friendly advice. They've made it clear that releasing the photos would have consequences. They've suggested that my military pension could be reviewed, that my medical benefits could be questioned, that a veteran with PTSD making wild claims about government conspiracies wouldn't be taken seriously anyway. They're probably right about that last part. But I don't care anymore. I'm putting this out there because people need to know. These creatures exist. The government knows they exist. And there's an entire program dedicated to keeping that knowledge secret, to controlling the narrative, to making sure the public never has to confront the reality that our forests hold intelligent beings we don't understand. The creature I found had been alive, had walked through those forests, had breathed and eaten and existed. And someone had killed it, broken its bones, beaten it until it died, then cut it open and harvested its organs like it was nothing more than a lab specimen. That's what was inside the rotting Bigfoot. Not just decomposition, not just natural death, but evidence of systematic exploitation. Evidence of a program that treats conscious beings as research subjects. Evidence that somewhere in some facility we'll never hear about, there are scientists studying tissue samples taken from creatures that officially don't exist. I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button one more time. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video. Download it before it gets taken down, because it will get taken down. I've already received 2 cease and desist letters from lawyers I've never heard of, representing clients who won't identify themselves. And leave a comment.
Tell me you believe me.
Tell me you understand what this means. Tell me I'm not crazy for risking everything to get this information out. Because I've thought about deleting everything, about forgetting what I saw, taking their advice, living out my retirement in quiet isolation. But every time I close my eyes, I see that chest cavity. I see those clean surgical cuts. I see that tracking device blinking red in a pool of rotting tissue. And I know I can't stay silent. The photos are out there now, distributed across multiple platforms, multiple accounts, backed up in locations I won't disclose. You can look for them if you know where to search. You can see the evidence for yourself. The tracking device with its government contract number. The surgical precision of the organ removal. The body of a creature that shouldn't exist according to official science, but clearly, undeniably does. I don't know what happened to that body after I left. I assume the team came back, retrieved it, destroyed any remaining evidence. The ravine looked empty when I returned a week later. No bones, no fur, nothing to suggest a massive carcass had rotted there for days. They're good at cleanup, good at making problems disappear. But they can't make the photos disappear now. Can't make my testimony disappear. Can't silence everyone who sees this and starts asking questions. My name is Jacob Reeves. I'm a retired Army veteran living in Washington State. In November 2021, I found a dead Bigfoot in the Olympic National Forest. What was inside that rotting body shocked me, horrified me, and revealed a truth the government has been hiding for decades. These creatures exist. They're being monitored, tracked, studied, and exploited. And when they die, teams move in to harvest biological materials before evidence can be discovered by the public. I found that evidence. I took photos. I removed the tracking device. And now I'm telling you, despite the threats, despite the consequences, despite knowing this will probably destroy what's left of my quiet life. Because some truths are too important to bury. Some secrets need to be exposed. And some lives, even non-human lives, deserve to be acknowledged and respected, not treated as classified research subjects. The tracking device is destroyed. The photos are preserved. The truth is out. And I'll live with whatever comes next, knowing I did the right thing. Knowing that somewhere someone will see this and understand that our forests hold more than we've been told. That consciousness takes forms we haven't acknowledged. That beings we dismiss as myth are real and vulnerable and deserve better than being reduced to biological samples in secret laboratories. What was inside that rotting Bigfoot will shock you. It shocked me. It should shock all of us. Now you know. Now we all know. And they can't make us forget.